Welcome to this, the third in the series of tutorials where I'm explaining some of the filters that you find in Nik Color Efex Pro, and the ones especially that I consider to be essential for landscape photography. The past two of these videos focused on the Pro Contrast and also the Skylight filter. Today I'm going to introduce you to the third filter that I think is essential for a landscape photographer. As before, I've got a new image open here. I've made a few adjustments to it already in Pro Contrast and Skylight filter, just so you can see what I've actually done. I'll just use the compare option, so effects are really quite minimal at this stage. Now, the filter I'd like to introduce you to this time is the tonal contrast filter. So let's just add a new filter holder, and we can select the tonal contrast. Now, the default settings for this are quite severe, as you can tell, but actually the tonal contrast has a number of other options. These are the default. You can go for the strong effect, which is pretty horrendous. You can also go for the high pass, which in this case really just causes everything to block up, or you can go for the softening effect. And actually the softening effect has introduced quite a nice look to this image. Now, over here on the right you can see the actual controls and how those have been altered as we select one of these options. Okay, now that gives you some idea as to maybe how to use this filter, but let's take a closer look at it. So the highlights are really where we can introduce or reduce contrast based on the highlights in the image. So in this instance the highlights are likely to be up in this area. So as I increase that, you'll see definition is brought into those areas. When I reduce it to a negative value, you can see that it removes the definition. Same with the midtones, so there's some midtones here and here, and in a moment you'll see the introduction of detail into those areas. And then we've got the shadow areas, which would be here, and the rocks over here. So again, introduction of detail. Now, how much detail and how fine a detail is emphasized on here is controlled with this contrast type. Now, at the moment we've got it set to fine, but as I change that to standard, you can see that it changes the detail. If I move it to high pass, it changes it again. Balanced also tends to be used to open up these areas, and also strong tends to put in an even stronger effect for opening up shadow areas. So you can actually see this happening on the histogram down here. So if you watch as we move across each of these, it changes the shape of the histogram and the effect that we get. So for the moment I'm just going to put this into standard mode. And what I want to do is to potentially add some tonal contrast into the shadow areas, and that will cause these shadows, rather than to be blocky and dark, to open up. So watch what happens. There we go. And also in terms of the highlight, I want to keep that quite soft, but I'm still going to add a little bit more in, and then in the midtones you can add in a little bit more detail there. Now that's actually quite strong, so maybe I will go for the fine, and we will increase the saturation slightly on here. Now if we don't want to actually put too much contrast into the shadow area, we can control it with this setting here, and also the highlights here. So at the moment that gives quite a nice balance to the image. Now we're pulling out details in the shadows, the highlights have got quite a lot of colour now, and if we compare that to the starting image, you can see we really have transformed the look of the image and also the feel. And let's just have a look at it side by side so you can see the difference. Now if we turn off the Pro Contrast and also the Skylight filter, you can see that the adjustments we've applied aren't really that great with just the tonal contrast. But it's the fact that it's working together with these other filters that makes the big difference. So there's another filter that you can add to your collection of essential landscape filters.